Hi, welcome to yet another section of our 30 Days of Code Challenge brought to you by Codeflex. Today we'll be looking at typography as related to web development, right? So, and also we'll be introducing us to CSS Grid, right? Just introduction. But today, let's quickly look at CSS typography as is kind of brief. We wouldn't be wasting much of our time there. So we'll just talk about the very important aspect and how to actually use them effectively, right? So first of all, what's typography? Without speaking too much of grammar, typography simply means everything that you need to do to make your text visually appealing to your end users. All that is what typography encompasses in web development, right? So in typography, we're talking about what your text look like, how to color it, how to add contrast, how to make it look beautiful. You want it to be slanty, you want it to be bold, you know, you want your text to have some spacing, you want your words and the space between your words to be so. You want your text directions to be from left to right. All these are typography. They are all categorized under typography. So it's as simple as that, right? Typography is everything that has to do with making your text visually appealing to your end user. So there are lots of stuffs under typography, but we'll be looking at the ones that are most frequently used and that we nearly cannot do without if we want to be really, or we want our web app to really stand out, right? We need to look at some of these typographic concepts that are common and we will always be using. Stuff like font family, font style, font weight, font sizes, text indent, word spacing, letter spacing, and all of that. Those are things you frequently or you can easily use, right, to enhance your uh, web pages text, right? So, um, without wasting much time, we like to just practicalize some of them, and there are various ways of using these stuff, right? There are some fonts by default. When you write your HTML, of course, is displaying with some particular fonts, right? Font families and sizes and all of that. Those are default font families and sizes that are set by HTML, right? So you can now use CSS to use this font family um, property to set CSS own default um, fonts, right? So those can either be any kind of font, they can be customized fonts, and they can also be default fonts, right? Then other ways of also applying fonts to your web pages are by importing them from a website like Google Font, right? You can actually import your fonts from Google Fonts and then use it in your projects, or you can even link them to a live Google Font uh, gallery, or is it the doc I'll call it, right? So we'll quickly look at the default ways of doing it. Then we'll round everything up with linking it with Google Fonts. There is it's talking about Google Fonts because it's most common. It's actually not only Google Fonts that that gives us that opportunity to be able to use web fonts, right? There are other um there are other websites also, but Google font is most common and that's what people use often. So now, everything you see on the screen is having a font, right? If you look at your Codeflex logo, this very logo we are seeing on the screen, you see that it has a font that is different from what you are seeing in the navigation, right? Now, let's see the navigation. Okay, navigation actually have a font family set. That's why you are seeing that it is different from Codeflex. So if I take this off, for instance, is going to resort to the default font family of the HTML, right? The font family of HTML. So that is what font families are actually all about. They you select your font family, you pick a font family that suits whatever project you want to do, and um use them, right? And when you pick them, they become available for your use. Sorry, don't mind my voice. I'm kind of down, but I'm just trying to. Okay. So now, how do we use our font family, right? Actually, fonts, CSS fonts are inheritable properties, right? Like, when we talk about inheritance in real life, there need to be a parent that passes a particular trait to children, then before we can say that those traits are inheritable, right? And those children have inherited that trait from their parents because they are children, right? So the same way we have it in CSS, when properties are given to a parent element, the children have the ability to inherit those properties from their parents, even though it's not all properties that are inherited and that are inheritable from parents. Like properties like padding margin, right? They are not inheritable. These are not inheritable properties. That's why if I apply padding and margin to my body, it doesn't mean that all the paragraph tag, all the div tag will have a padding, the same padding I have set to the body because the body is a parent to them. No, padding is not inheritable. So the divs and the paragraphs and whatever element I have inside my body will not be able to inherit that. But if I apply um inheritable properties, right? Like font sizes that are inheritable to my body, all the child element are going to inherit it, right? If I give it a text color, they will all inherit it because these are inheritable CSS properties, right? So that is why you see that when we give this a font family here, right? It's working, but it's working only within the nav, right? It is actually not the nav that is having those tests, but because the nav is a parent to the UL, and the UL, that the nav is a parent to the UL. So the UL will inherit this font family from the nav. And because the UL is not directly having the test, it's also going to pass that property to its own child, which is the LI, and the LI will also pass it to the A tag, which is the anchor tag that holds the test exactly. So that's the generational trait that has been passed down from nav to UL to LI and to A. That's because it's inheritable, right? And inheritable properties in CSS, the way CSS is designed, these properties can only go from parents to children, right? They can't go from children to parent. So that means parents cannot, in real life, it's the same thing. Parents cannot inherit properties from their children. Only children can inherit from parents, right? That's the same thing that is working here. You don't expect that because I have given my nav a font family, and then you will not expect that my header is going to inherit it or my body is going to have that same property. No. If I want that property to be shared across other siblings of my nav, then I have to take that property to a parent that houses both of them so that we both inherit it equally from their parent, right? So that's why I'm going to take this out of this place. I'll take it off and bring it to body or my HTML, which are senior um, to or parent to every other this thing. So you see that immediately I apply it to the HTML, it applied to every other element that is inside my document. And the reason why you are seeing that my JavaScript, these skills below are still where they are is probably because I set a value for them. Let me see. Where are they? Okay. I don't think I did. Okay, yeah, I know I did something that must make it not to reflect, because if you see them, they are still having some funny fonts there. So look at their parents. I actually gave a font family of Roboto here, and that is why it's different from what you are seeing, because this is a child element, right? And it's a property applied to child element will always override that in the parent element, right? That's how it's designed in CSS, right? So apart from font family, there are other things that we can also do to make our text look really good. Like I said, another thing is contrast. We have to be very sure that whatever text color we are picking is going to come out on the background is going to be on. Imagine that my header is having this background and I'm giving it a text of white. It's not going to make sense, right? You see, you have to strain your eye to be able to read what is there. So maintaining good contrast is also very important. Putting black text in white background or putting white text in dark background so the text will be bold enough and clear enough for whoever can see to see it, right? And that's exactly what we have here. You see that is clear the way it is, right? So that's that about contrast. And you also have font styles, right? Now, sorry, excuse me. Okay, all right. Now, if you look at our, sorry, what was I saying? Okay, another thing is font sizes, right? Font sizes is another way of making our text really visually appealing because it helps to either reduce or increases it, right? There are situations where you use large fonts and your text cuts they overflow and they are not showing completely on the screen. So you have to also know how to manipulate the sizes of your text. And what CSS property do you use to do that? You use the font size property, right? If you see here, my header is having a font size of 30 pixel. Right now, if I take that off, take this font size off, let's see what's going to happen. You see how really small the logo is looking because I use the font size to actually make it bold for people to see it clearly, right? So that's what font size do, and there are various ways of applying font sizes. You can use relative values like percentage, then you can use absolute values like what you are seeing there, 30 pixel. You can also use relative values like M and rem, right? M is actually also what M does is it's work with the parent font size, right? Why rem is relative M. Why M is working with the direct parent, rem is working with the root element, right? So that is why rem will always work with the root element. So if, for instance, my HTML, which is a root element, right, is having a font size of 16 rem, I'm sorry, 16 pixel, right? So my rem is going to be working throughout my page, is going to be working with that 16 pixel. So if my HTML font size is 16 pixel, it means that for me, for every of my elements that are inside the HTML, once I say one rem, I mean 16 pixel. So whatever value I now give is going to work in relation to that my root element. That's why it's called relative right? Because it's going to be working with that my root element font size. So if my root element is 16 pixel and I come down to say um a particular div should be 2 rem, what it's going to do is it's going to multiply the value I have with what the root element is having, and that means that element is going to have times 2 of what the root element is having. So if I give that particular element 2 rem, I am telling that element to have a 32 pixel. And if I give it a 1.5 rem, I'm telling it to divide the root element by 2, right? Which is going to be 8 pixels. So that's how relative values work in CSS. Also, we also have other stuff like font weight, which talk about how bold the text should be looking. For instance, if I come to my logo now, here is my logo, and I give it a font weight of say bold. It's already bold, but you see the effect makes it bolder, right? Then I can still make it bolder. Did it show any effect? No. Okay. So that's just what font weight does, yeah, right? It increases the thickness of your text. Then you also have font sizes. Sorry, font styles. What font style does is to tell whether you want your fonts to either be italic or just be normal. For instance, if I come to my nav and I say I want it to have a font style of italic, I can say it should be italic, and you see that there's a slant display of it there. So that's what font style is all about. It just gives you that italic, and there are more of there are normal, there is also oblique, right? You can use oblique and see what is going to give us so much the same. So it's mainly about how whether you want your text to be italic or not. That is what font styles do. Then what else do we talk about in this place? There are also other other manipulations that you do with file your tests. A lot of them, like you also have test decorations, you have test transformation, right? Like my navigation items are actually on a title case right now. I can decide to make them uppercase even though they are not uppercase right from my HTML. I can give them a test transform, right? Where's this test transform, right, of what I can make it uppercase, right? And when I make it uppercase, you see all of them turn to uppercase, and I can also make it capitalize, which is what it is already. Then I can also make it lower case, and you see everything becomes lower case. Then let's take that out. I can also see that I want the text decoration of all of them to be line through. So they will be line through them, and I can also see that it should be underline, right? And it will be under, and I can also see that it should be overline, and it will be on top. Just like that, there are lots of um properties that allows you to do so many things with your test, right? And that is why they are part of typography. Then what else? You can also decide to say, okay, you want to space your tests, right? You don't like the way HOME of home is so close together. So that means what you want to do is to actually manipulate the letters. So what you can do there is to say letter spacing, right? You can actually say sorry, letter spacing, and it usually take number value. I can say to um I can say, okay, let's say 4 px, right? You see that the letters are spaced from each other. So I can say 2 pixel and it will still space, right? Then I can also say that I want I can also say that the words are too close, right? The words are too close. I want to give them uh word spacing. There's also word spacing, right? Of, let's say, 4 rem, right? Yeah, that's not going to work, right? It's not working because there is no word inside the anchor tag. The anchor tag itself is carrying a word already. So we need to have more than two words in the particular element for it to be able to for word spacing to be able to work, right? And that's just it. So that's that about CSS fonts and all of that. Then another thing, this is just a way of using your fonts and font family that are that are default with your CSS, right? But for you to link your tag to your your what's it called, your styles to Google Fonts, you need to go to Google Fonts websites. Let me just Google and say, sorry, Google Fonts, and follow the website to where it is, which is right here. I'll open Google Fonts. Sorry, it's loading. So So it comes with different fonts and a demo of them all. So you can pick from anyone. You can pick anyone you want. So I think this is Doto, which I actually use there. So I can pick Doto. Now, when I click on Doto, it's going to show me a demo of it. Then I can now say, okay, I want to get the font, right? So I have some font here, but let me remove this because if I don't, it's going to copy both of them together. So I'll say, give me the embedded code, and it's going to give me um what I will take to my CSS, my HTML, in case I want to link Google Font to my HTML. What I will do is just copy this and come to my HTML head, right, which is here, and paste my link there, right? So now HTML now understand that, okay, it wants to use a font that comes from Google Fonts. So now that I have used Doto, I can now go back to my to my CSS and start using Doto in my CSS. If you look at here already, Doto is already working in my navigation because why? I have Doto in my nav. Where is it? Um, Sorry, where do I have Doto? I think I have it in my body. Okay, it's actually applying to everything. Yeah, I have it in my HTML, which is the root element. So you can see that it has changed the font of everything to Doto. You can see that they are kind of dotted. So that's how you use it. Once you copy the link and put it in HTML, it becomes functional. Now, if I take this off and go back, another way you can do it is to, let me Control Z and take this off, right? Everything goes back to normal. So I can also come and copy the, say I don't want to put it in my in my HTML, I want it to be in my CSS. So um instead of copying this link, I'm going to import it. So when I click this, this is going to appear, right? If I want to put these styles in my head, my HTML head, I will lift it. But because I don't want to tamper with my HTML head, I just want to put everything in my CSS. So I will just copy this and take it to my CSS right here, usually on top, and paste it there. So now my CSS now recognizes that it's going to use Doto that is coming from Google Fonts, right? So if you look at it, everything is still not Doto, but immediately I activate Doto font family here like this, you see that everything has changed. So it now recognizes that a font is coming from Google Font. So that's how you can select any font. There are plenty of fonts right here. You can just keep scrolling. Sorry. Oh, sorry. I went too far. So you can keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and you see a lot of fonts that you will pick from and just use in your project. So that is that about typography. And I would like to, before the section ends, to quickly introduce us to CSS Grid, right? So, what is CSS Grid? CSS Grid is actually a CSS concept that allows us to handle web pages layering in a very easy way, right? While we talked about CSS Flex was doing almost the same thing, it depends on you and whatever project you are handling. It depends on how how um how good you are in any of these concepts, right? Some persons will tell you that CSS is better, CSS Flexbox is better. Some will tell you that CSS Grid is better. It just depends on you and the one you are very familiar or very comfortable with using, right? But they have their importance and their usefulness, and you cannot overemphasize how useful they are. Then the difference between CSS Grid and CSS Flex is very simple. I could remember that when I was talking about CSS Flex, I told us that CSS Flex is one direction. That is why if you just display a container flex, it's going to be on the row by default. If you want it to be on the column, you have to specify that it should be on column. That's to tell you that it's in one direction. Once you change it to column, it cannot be row. Once you change it back to row, it cannot be column. It can only be one at a time. That's why it's called a single direction um, layout, right? Then, but when you talk about CSS grid is two-dimensional, just like your tables, right? CSS grid is two-dimensional. You can work with both column and row at the same time. That's what makes it two-directional, right? So, without wasting too much time, we would like to see how CSS Grid actually work in action. CSS Grid, you in CSS Grid, you have to specify it from the very onset. Since you can have columns and you can have row at the same time, you have to specify how you want your column to be and how you want your row to be, how many columns you want to have and how many rows you want to have. But in most cases, you are going to be working mostly with CSS columns, right? So most of the time you just allow rows to fit in and adjust themselves, but you work mainly with CSS columns. So grid columns, sorry. So what I will do for us to use our grid, I want to copy this image and duplicate it like 6 to 7 times. V. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, if you look at this, you see it's by default stacking on top of each other, right? What grid can do is for me to specify how I want these things to actually behave, right? So now this is my hero section, right? Where's my hero here? Have I added style? Okay. I have not actually displayed it anything. So I can come here now, and the first thing I'll do is to convert this hero container, which is just a container, to I have to convert it to grid container. And once I convert it to a grid container, just like Flex, all the element, the direct element inside becomes a grid item, right? So I'll say display, I want you to be displayed grid, right? And that's all. Yet, yes, you are not going to see any changes because, like I said, you have to specify how many columns and how many row you want it to be, right? So the reason why I say most of the time you are going to be working with column is that once you've set a column, every other thing will adjust unless you want otherwise, right? So if I come now and say my grid template column, I want to have a grid template column of 1FR. That's 1FR simply means take the full the take the full size of whatever container you are having if it's just one. Now if I had another one FR, I'm saying that there should be two, one FR, one FR, right? Share it. And if I add another one, I'm saying it should be three, right? So you see that the more I'm adding it, the more they are showing there. But my hero is having an absolute width. That's why it's not filling the screen. So let me change this to 100%. And you see that we are having an overflow. Why? We are having an overflow for a reason. Okay, I think this my unnecessary padding and margin. Okay, yeah, it's perfectly filling the screen now. So you can see another thing, another property that comes with grid, just like you have gap in CSS and Flex, you can also use your gap property here. And when I use the shorthand gap property, it's going to be for all. So if I say one rem, it's going to be both column and row. But I can specify to say I just want row gap, right? And it's going to be for only row as a two rem. You see that one rem, I mean row gap. You see that it's actually just for row, and I'll come and also say column gap to be, oh sorry, column gap. What am I writing? Column gap to be, let's say, three rem. And you see that column now have their own gap as well. So let me still give this hero a padding of just one rem, so that so you can see that. So but shorthand, once I say gap, I can use two value. The first one will be for row and the second one will be for column. So if I say 10 px and say 20 px, right? You see that one is for row and one is for column. The smaller one is for row, is row gap. The bigger one is for column gap. That's to tell you that the first one is for row and the second one is for column. So um then another thing we can do is, since we are using FR for our column gap, why are we repeating it? That means if I need to have up to 5 columns, I will still have to add FR. It doesn't necessarily mean that I must use FR, right? I can actually still use percent. I can say this, I can use absolute value. I can say this, the last one should be, I want 4 columns, but I want the last one to be four rem, right? Sorry, I said 2 rem. I want the last one to be 4 rem, and it will still work. 4 rem will take itself, and the other remaining part will be shared equally. That is what FR, share the available space equally. That's what it means. It's fractional value, right? So even if I say it should be 20 rem, you see that its own is going to work. It's this is the rest that will shrink, right? So but if I have 4FR, I have another 1FR like this. Why am I having all this repetition? So I can just remove all this repetition and use repeat function, right? When I use repeat function, the first value is the number of times, the number of columns I want to have. So I will just say 4 because it's 4, right? I put a comma and I'll now specify the size, right? I'll just say 1FR, and you see that we are still going to have the same thing, but instead of having to repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat, then um what else this is just an introduction to CSS Grid though. So um I will be ending this section here, and please do like, share, and comment when you get this video. Very important, like, share, and comment. So I'll be leaving you here for today. Happy coding, and don't give up, right? I'll, I'll be seeing you in the next section. Bye.